All right, back to the Battle of Stalingrad. Um, the Soviets waited till the winter set in, and once the winter set in, they knew that they had the Germans stretched so far into Russia. It was very hard for the Germans to get supplies back to their troops from Germany. So the Russians were able to, the Soviets actually, not the Russians, the Soviets at that time, were able to break up and harass the supply lines. The Soviets finally launched an offensive that surrounded the city and took it back. In that offensive, they came across the frozen. The part of them came across the frozen lake that was behind Stalingrad. They took 90,000 German prisoners. They killed 300,000 German soldiers. This is the huge numbers here are why it is so important in the battle in Europe. 300,000 German soldiers dead seems like a lot, but when you consider that over 1 million Soviet soldiers died, you can see what huge toll that this battle took on both the Soviets and the Germans. But the Germans were routed and turned back from Russia, out of the Soviet Union. Next slide. Here you can see some of the warfare that took place during this time. These are Soviet soldiers, and this is a German soldier frozen with the Soviet flag in his hand, or with the Nazi flag in his hand on the ground. All right, let's finish this. We had already started in Italy in the last lecture. The big push was going to be called Operation Overlord. We call it D-Day today. June 6, 1944. 4,600 ships, over 1,000 bombers, 23,000 paratroopers would parachute in behind enemy lines, 150,000 men headed for the coast of France or Normandy. And you see the top picture? There they are, just like in Private Ryan, jumping off the ship, storming the beaches. The middle picture is them after the beach has been secured, and the bottom picture is Eisenhower telling the troops, giving them a pep talk before they left. Oops. Let's go on to the next slide. General U.S. Patton devised his own sort of blitzkrieg, his fast-moving. His troops didn't like him very much. They called him Old Blood and Guts. His guts, or his guts and our blood, they used to say. But Patton moved his troops at an amazing pace up through Italy, over the Alps, into Germany. He busted through the German lines. The French, who were fighting with the USS Army, finally took back Paris, and we left General Charles de Gaulle in charge. He was the general who took command of the troops in Africa and took the troops across the Mediterranean back into Italy and into France. The Battle of the Bulge was the most important battle between the Americans and the Germans. As we were pushing towards Germany, it is the last stand. It was in the wintertime, and it's the last stand of the Germans, really. Not the last battle, but the last big push. America poured in resources. The Germans poured in as many men as they could to fight. 600,000 American soldiers moved in, and after a prolonged fight, we won that battle and began to move towards Berlin. Germany invaded. By the way, Berlin is the capital of Germany. Soviet Union, or Russia, invaded Germany from the east. The Americans and the British came in from the west. Since the Soviets in the battle with Germany had lost up to 18 million citizens, 18 million people died at the hands of the Nazis in the Soviet Union. We allowed the Soviets to take Berlin and accept the surrender of Germany because of their enormous losses that they took during this war. Hitler commits suicide, as you know, in his bunker. Germany surrenders unconditionally to the Soviets. VE Day is Victory in Europe Day. And here you can see in the bottom picture Times Square, New York City, celebration when the war was over. And the top picture, of course, is the Soviet flag, at the time Russia, the Soviet flag being flown over the Reichstag, or what was left of it, in Germany. And I believe all we have to talk about is the Yalta Conference. At the Yalta Conference, the Soviet leader promised free elections in Eastern Europe, where his army was. They split Germany into 4 separate zones, which you can see: British, Russian, American, and French. They split Berlin itself into 4 separate zones. And Russia, or the USSR, the Soviet Union, would enter the war with America against Japan, and that is the end of the lecture.